The sun was already hot by the time Lena Carter turned into the gravel parking lot of Riverbend Care Home on the outskirts of Montgomery, Alabama. The building looked like a place that had once tried to be cheerful, faded shutters, a cracked fountain, plastic flowers in rusted planters, but years of neglect had dulled its charm. Lena adjusted her backpack on one shoulder, took a breath, and pushed through the heavy glass doors. It wasn't her first time volunteering. She'd helped at shelters, food banks, even at the animal rescue downtown. But something about this place felt different. Heavier. Slower. Like the air itself carried the weight of forgotten people and the stories no one asked about anymore. The head nurse, a sharp-voiced woman named Miss Gloria, gave Lena a tour that felt more like a warning. "Don't go poking where you're not needed," she said as they passed a hallway of motionless residents staring at the muted TV. "Some of these folks don't want company. And some, well, they ain't got the mind to remember you 5 minutes after you leave." They stopped outside a sunlit room at the end of the hall. "That one," Gloria said, nodding toward the open door. "We call him the bear man, name's Walter. Hasn't said more than 3 words in the last 5 years. Sits by that window all day with that raggedy old teddy bear. Don't waste your time." Naturally, that's where Lena went first. Walter's room was plain, linoleum floors, hospital white walls, and a single framed photo on the dresser of a younger man in military uniform. Walter himself sat by the window in a wooden chair, his back straight but his expression empty. His skin was deep brown, weathered and dry, his gray hair trimmed short. In his lap rested a teddy bear so worn its fur had bald patches and one button eye dangled by a thread. He held it like something sacred. Lena didn't speak at first. She simply pulled up a chair and sat beside him, close enough to feel the warm sunlight but not so close as to startle. She glanced at him. Nothing. Not a twitch. So she took out a paperback of Robert Frost poems from her bag, something her grandmother used to read to her, and began softly. "Some say the world will end in fire. Some say in ice." Walter didn't flinch. Didn't move. But his eyes, they shifted just slightly from the window to her. That was enough to keep her coming back. Over the next week, Lena made it a routine. Always at the same time in the afternoon, always with a new book or newspaper. Sometimes she read short stories. Sometimes she talked about her day, her dog, her mama's obsession with game shows. Walter never replied. But his eyes always followed her now, and once, when she paused too long, he tapped his fingers on the armrest, just once, like he missed the sound of her voice. Other nurses started noticing. "You're wasting your time," one whispered behind the coffee station. "That man's just too far gone." But Lena ignored them. It wasn't about expecting something. It was about showing up anyway. One day, as she read a passage from To Kill a Mockingbird, Lena paused to sip water. The room was quiet, thick with summer heat and the creak of old floorboards. And then she heard it, so faint she almost thought she imagined it. "Thank you." She looked up. Walter's lips were still moving, ever so slightly, and his gaze was locked on her. His voice was a whisper, rusted from years of silence, but unmistakably real. "Thank you," he said again, his fingers gently clutching the bear. Lena's eyes welled with tears. Not because it was dramatic or life-changing, but because it was something. A crack in the wall. A signal from deep inside someone the world had written off. That night, she lay in bed and replayed the moment in her mind. She wondered about the teddy bear, why he held it so tight, why he never let it go. There was something inside Walter, something buried, and she was sure of it now. He wasn't just the bear man. He was someone who had loved and lost. Someone who had waited. And Lena, for reasons she couldn't yet explain, was determined to find out the rest. The days at Riverbend Care Home began to take on a rhythm. After the morning meds were distributed and the afternoon sun began pouring through the west-facing windows, Lena made her way to Walter's room like clockwork. She'd gotten used to the little things, the way he tapped the windowsill when she read a line he liked, the way he clutched his teddy bear just a little tighter when someone unfamiliar entered the room, the way he sometimes turned his head when a gospel hymn played from the hallway radio. Still, He spoke rarely. Thank you had become a ritual between them now, always in a low, cracked whisper, always after she read. But there was a softness to him now, something in the way his shoulders no longer curled inward. Lena had a feeling he was waiting for something. Or someone. One particularly rainy afternoon, she arrived with a copy of Langston Hughes' poems. The thunder outside rolled lazily, and the lights flickered once or twice, but Lena kept reading. Walter's eyes were closed, head tilted slightly back, the bear still cradled in his lap. Then it happened. As Lena stood to leave, her bag brushing the armrest, she accidentally bumped the teddy bear. It slid from Walter's hands and hit the linoleum floor with a dull thud. Walter let out a sharp breath, almost a gasp, and bent over with more urgency than Lena had seen in him. His hands trembled as he reached for the bear. "I'm so sorry," Lena said quickly, crouching down to help. She gently picked it up and examined it for damage before placing it back in his lap. "I didn't mean to." That's when she noticed it. There was a small patch on the underside of the bear's belly, the stitching looser than the rest. The thread was faded and almost invisible against the old fabric, but the seam had split ever so slightly in the fall. Something was tucked inside. Lena hesitated. "Walter, is this yours?" she asked quietly. Walter didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the bear now, his mouth drawn in a tight line. He didn't shake his head or nod, just stared. With slow, respectful hands, Lena eased her fingers into the seam and pulled out a small, folded piece of yellowed paper. It was brittle and curled at the edges, as if it had lived hidden for decades. She looked at him again. Still no objection. Just the bear clutched against his chest like armor. Lena unfolded the paper. It was a letter, written in elegant, looping handwriting. The date at the top, June 12, 1963. "My dearest Walter, I don't know if this will ever reach you, but I had to try. I can't do this anymore. The lying, the hiding, the pretending we are nothing when we were everything. I want to run away with you. Tonight. I'll wait by the willow tree near the bridge, just like always. I don't care what anyone says anymore. I am yours. Forever. Irene." Lena read the words over again, stunned by their raw emotion. They were full of longing and quiet desperation, the kind born from years of being told your love was wrong. She looked up. Walter's eyes were wet now, and a single tear had escaped down the side of his face. "Irene," he whispered. A name. The first one he'd spoken. "Is she?" Lena started, but stopped. The questions were forming rapidly in her mind. Who was Irene? What happened to her? Why was the letter hidden? But she knew better than to push. Walter reached out slowly and took the letter from her hands, holding it like something holy. Then, wordlessly, he closed his eyes and pressed the paper to his chest. Lena felt the ground shift under her feet. This wasn't just a story about an old man and a bear anymore. There was a love story buried in this silence, a dangerous, forbidden love story hidden behind decades of pain. And now, because of one fall and one small tear in a stuffed bear's seam, the past had begun to surface. That night, Lena sat in her car long after her shift ended, the rain still tapping on the windshield. The image of Walter, whispering, "Irene," over and over in the quiet of his room, wouldn't leave her. She didn't know what the full story was yet. But she knew one thing for certain. Someone had tried to silence that love. And Lena wasn't going to let them. The letter changed everything. Lena couldn't stop thinking about it. The date, the trembling script, the promise to run away. Irene. A name whispered like prayer from Walter's fragile lips. Who was she? And why had she vanished? The next day, Lena arrived at Riverbend with something new in her bag. A worn leather notebook, the kind used by reporters or detectives. She had never investigated anything in her life, but this mystery felt personal. For the first time, she felt like she was carrying someone else's heart inside her own. Walter was waiting in his usual spot, sunlight outlining his shoulders like a faded halo. The teddy bear sat nestled in his arms again, and the letter, freshly pressed and placed in a clear sleeve, was on the nightstand beside him. A relic returned to its altar. "Good afternoon," Lena greeted softly, sitting down. Walter nodded. "Another first." His eyes followed her hands as she opened the notebook. "I did some digging," she said gently, "about Irene." His jaw tightened ever so slightly. "I found old fire records from Montgomery, 1963, Lena continued. "There was a house fire on Belmont Street that summer. 3 days after the date on the letter." Walter blinked once. The room went very still. "They said a young white woman died in the fire. Irene Caldwell, 21 years old." "But," Lena leaned in, her voice quiet but firm, "there's no official death certificate. No autopsy. Just a report written by a local sheriff and filed away. That's it. No funeral, no grave listed, no next of kin." Walter's lips parted, just slightly. "She disappeared," Lena whispered. "And they made it look like she died." Walter gripped the bear tightly. His throat worked as if he were trying to speak, but the words seemed to splinter inside him. "Irene was real, wasn't she?" Lena asked. He nodded. "You loved her." His chin dropped slightly. Another nod. But then, after a long silence, he rasped, "We were gonna leave." His voice was rough, like something dug up after years underground. Lena leaned in, heart pounding. "She was white," he continued, barely above a breath. "And I was black and foolish. We thought love would be enough." He laughed once, dry and bitter. "They said it was dangerous," he went on. "Her people, my brother, my pastor, everyone, said I'd get us both killed." Lena said nothing, just listened. Walter's eyes filled again. "That night, I waited, at the bridge, all night. She never came." He looked out the window like he could still see her ghost across the decades. "Next day, they said she died in a fire. I didn't go to the house. Didn't ask questions. I just," his voice cracked, "I broke. I shut down. I thought I'd killed her with my loving." Lena felt a lump rise in her throat. This wasn't just grief. It was a life unraveled. A love story buried alive. "I never saw her body," Walter whispered. "No casket. Just words. Just silence." He turned to her, eyes wide with something between fear and fragile hope. "Do you think she's alive?" Lena hesitated. "I don't know. But I want to find out." Walter exhaled slowly, as though he'd been holding that breath for decades. Lena stood up. "I'm going to keep looking, okay? If that's all right with you." He nodded, a little firmer this time. As Lena walked down the hall, past wheelchairs and creaking tile, she felt a shift, like the story was no longer hers alone. Walter had let her in. And with that came a responsibility she hadn't asked for, but would never walk away from. That night, she stayed up combing online archives, newspaper clippings, adoption records, even reaching out anonymously to a local historical society. Every lead she found brought new questions. Why was there no death certificate? Why didn't anyone look for Irene? And most importantly, who stood to gain from making her disappear? Whatever had happened in 1963, it had been silenced, not by accident, but on purpose. And Lena was beginning to realize, someone had wanted Irene erased. But Irene had written a letter. And Walter had kept it safe. Now Lena would carry it forward. The early evening heat clung to Montgomery like a second skin. Lena sat in her car, gripping the wheel, staring at the small brick house across the street. It was tidy, modest, and unassuming, but the name she'd tracked here changed everything. Edward Solomon, Walter's younger brother. She hadn't told Walter she was coming. Part of her didn't know if she should. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone had deliberately made Irene disappear, and all signs pointed to family. The door creaked open before she even knocked. An old man with sharp eyes and thinning white hair stood behind the screen. You looking for someone? Edward Solomon? Lena asked. He gave her a long, assessing look. Depends who's asking. My name is Lena. I volunteer at Riverbend. Your brother. Walter lives there. Edward's face stiffened. He stepped out slowly, letting the screen door slam behind him. Haven't heard that name in years, he muttered. Lena offered a nervous smile. He still carries a teddy bear you gave him. It had a letter inside. Edward's eyes flickered. He said nothing, just turned and motioned for her to follow. Inside, the house smelled like lemon polish and old newspapers. On the walls hung photos of another life, children, graduations, a wedding that looked like it belonged to another century. Edward lowered himself into a recliner and gestured to a wooden chair nearby. You came to talk about her, didn't you? He asked without looking at her. Irene, Lena said. Yes. He closed his eyes. I figured that bear would come back to haunt me one day. Lena sat up straighter. So you do know what happened. Edward was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. Walter loved her. Foolboy didn't understand what world he was living in. Thought he could just run off with a white girl in Alabama in '63 and not get strung up for it. He thought she died, Lena said gently. Edward let out a dry, bitter laugh. Because I told him she did. Lena's stomach dropped. What? I was trying to save his damn life, Edward snapped. You think I wanted to? You think it was easy watching your brother walk into the lion's mouth with a smile on his face? He ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking decades older. I intercepted her letter, he confessed. The one telling him to meet her by the bridge. I burned it. Told him there'd been a fire. Told him she was gone. Lena felt her breath catch. Why didn't you let them be together? Because they were children, he growled. Because I saw what happened to boys who didn't know their place. Because I knew there were men in that town who'd set fire to a house, or a person, just to prove a point. He stood up now, pacing, eyes wild with years of regret. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought he'd move on. But he didn't. He shut down. Stopped talking. Started hugging that damn bear like it was the only thing keeping him breathing. He looked at Lena now, his voice breaking. I ruined him. You let him believe the woman he loved died in a fire, Lena whispered, her voice shaking. I had to, Edward insisted, though the conviction was gone now. I was scared. We were all scared. Lena stood. She's alive, Edward. Irene's alive. Edward froze. She's in Rochester. A memory care home. She remembers him. His knees gave way, and he sank into the recliner like something had snapped inside him. God help me, he murmured. Lena turned to go, but paused at the door. He still loves her, she said. He never stopped. Edward stared ahead, tears welling in his eyes. I know. Outside, the sun dipped low over the Montgomery skyline. Lena climbed into her car with her heart pounding, her hands shaking. The truth was messier than she'd imagined, uglier, sadder, more human. Back at Riverbend, Walter sat by the window, the teddy bear in his lap. Lena didn't tell him everything just yet. She simply sat beside him and read, her voice steady even as her heart ached. Because now she knew, his silence wasn't emptiness. It was grief. It was betrayal. It was love that had nowhere to go. And soon, she'd give it a direction. The snow was falling lightly by the time Lena stepped out of the taxi. Rochester, New York, was nothing like Montgomery. Colder, grayer, quieter. But the cold didn't matter. In her hand was the bear. And in her chest, her heart thundered. Riverbend's administrator had helped Lena pull strings and locate a memory care facility that matched her research. A private nurse named Clara had confirmed it. Yes, we have an Irene Caldwell. Mid-80s. Advanced dementia. Doesn't talk much. You're sure you're connected to her? Lena wasn't sure of anything, except that she had to see this through. For Walter, for Irene, for the girl who believed simple acts of kindness could rebuild lives. The facility was warm inside, filled with soft music and the scent of cinnamon. Lena followed Clara down a carpeted hallway, past residents watching television or staring into spaces only they could see. She has good days and bad, Clara warned. Mostly bad. She doesn't speak much anymore. Sometimes hums. A tune we can't place. Lena nodded, clutching the bear tighter. They stopped at a small room with pale yellow curtains. Inside, a frail woman with thin white hair sat in a chair by the window, staring out at the falling snow. Her features were fine and lined, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Irene, Clara said softly. You have a visitor. No reaction. Lena stepped forward. Hi. I'm Lena. Nothing. She pulled the bear from her bag, cradled it in her arms for a moment, then gently placed it in Irene's lap. The woman didn't move. I brought you someone, Lena said gently. You gave this bear to a man named Walter. He still has it. Still no movement. Then, Irene's fingers twitched. Lena held her breath. The old woman's hand trembled as she touched the bear's matted fur. Her eyes stayed fixed on the window, but her mouth moved. The barest shape of a word. Lena leaned closer. What was that? Walter. It was barely a whisper, a puff of breath. But Lena heard it. Her throat closed. Tears welled in her eyes. She crouched beside the chair, reaching out to gently take Irene's hand. He never stopped loving you, Lena whispered. He thought you died. But I found your letter, sewn into the bear. He saved it all this time. Irene's eyes fluttered closed. Her lips moved again. They said I couldn't go back. Lena leaned in further. Who said that? But Irene's gaze had drifted, her brief clarity fading into fog. She has moments, Clara said gently. They come and go. Lena sat with her for another hour, speaking softly, reading aloud from the letter, holding her hand. Every now and then, Irene would murmur Walter's name or hum a soft tune, the same melody over and over. A lullaby. A song from their youth. It didn't matter. The truth was undeniable. Irene Caldwell was alive. And she remembered him. That night, in a hotel room lit by a single bedside lamp, Lena stared at her notebook. She flipped through pages of timelines, theories, addresses. It had all led here. But now came the hardest part, telling Walter, preparing him, helping him decide whether he wanted to see the woman he'd mourned for 60 years. Back in Montgomery, Walter was having another quiet day when Lena returned. The moment she walked into the room, he looked up, eyes searching hers for something unspoken. Lena sat beside him and reached for his hand. I found her, she said gently. He blinked once. Then again. Irene. She's alive. Walter's lips parted. His grip tightened on the bear. She's in a care home in New York. She's older now and sick. But she remembered you. She said your name. Tears gathered in Walter's eyes, but he didn't cry. He simply nodded, once. Slow. Heavy with years. I want to see her, he whispered. Lena squeezed his hand. I'll make it happen. In that moment, with winter coming to Alabama and hope thawing like spring, 2 stories long thought finished began to write a new chapter. The plane touched down in Montgomery beneath a clear blue sky. The air was warmer than Rochester's icy wind, but there was something heavy in the breeze, like the hush before a storm. Walter waited at Riverbend, dressed in a soft sweater Lena had chosen for him. He sat in his wheelchair near the window, the teddy bear cradled in his lap, more like a shield than a comfort now. Lena had prepared him for days. She had shown him photos, played recordings of Irene's humming, even recited snippets of her old letters. Walter hadn't said much, but his hands had trembled every time she spoke her name. And now, she was here. The van from the airport pulled into the driveway. Lena rushed out to meet it. Clara, Irene's nurse from Rochester, helped guide her down the ramp. Irene looked so small in the wheelchair, her face pale, her hands folded delicately in her lap. Her eyes darted around like she was caught between decades. When she entered the room, Walter looked up. For a long, breathless moment, neither of them spoke. Then Irene leaned forward, squinting, her voice cracked and thin. "Walter." He nodded. His lips quivered, but no words came. Irene reached out a shaky hand. Walter took it, slowly, like he was afraid she might disappear again. Lena backed into the hallway, tears pricking her eyes. She didn't want to intrude on something sacred. Through the doorway, she watched Walter lift the bear, placing it gently in Irene's lap. "I kept it," he whispered. "All this time." Irene smiled. "I knew you would." They sat for what felt like hours, talking in fragments, remembering things the world had long forgotten. Irene's memory wandered in and out, but in moments of clarity, she was vivid, describing the yellow dress she wore the last time they saw each other, the way Walter's hands smelled like motor oil, the hiding places where they'd left letters like treasure. Then her voice lowered. "There's something I never told you." Walter leaned closer. "I was pregnant, Walter. When I left, I didn't know how to find you again. They told me you were dead, or that you'd left. I didn't know what to believe." Walter's entire body stilled. "I had a little girl," she continued, her voice trembling. "They took her from me. Said it would be safer. Said I couldn't raise a mixed child alone." Walter's hand gripped the bear like a lifeline. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I didn't know any of it. I tried to find you," Irene said. "But time just stole everything." He reached up, brushing a thumb gently down her weathered cheek. "We lost so much." Tears slipped down her face. "But not everything." They were still holding hands when the spell suddenly broke. Irene's body tensed. Her face changed. Her eyes narrowed, looking through Walter as if he were someone else entirely. "Don't touch me," she snapped, recoiling. "You stay away from me." Walter froze. The heartbreak on his face was immediate, gutting. Lena rushed in, kneeling beside Irene. "It's okay. You're safe. This is Walter. Remember." But Irene was shaking now, lost in another time, flinching from ghosts only she could see. Clara gently wheeled her out, murmuring soothing words, while Walter sat still as stone. Lena turned to him. "She didn't mean it. It's the dementia. Sometimes she thought I was someone else," he said quietly. "Someone who hurt her." Lena's heart cracked. "She knew you. Before that. She remembered you." Walter nodded, but he looked like a man who'd just been handed his heart and had to decide whether to hold it or let it fall. "Was she really pregnant?" he whispered. "I believe her," Lena said. "I think she never stopped loving you, Walter. Even when everything tried to pull her away." He didn't answer. Just looked down at the bear, then out the window where the afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the grass. That night, Walter didn't speak much. He held the bear closer, falling asleep with Irene's name on his lips. And Lena. She sat at the foot of his bed, silently scrolling through adoption records. Because now, it wasn't just about uncovering the past. It was about finding the future, a daughter neither of them had ever met. Lena hadn't slept much since Irene's confession. She sat curled on the couch at Riverbend late into the night, Walter asleep in his room just down the hall. In her lap were folders, printed records, and a worn notepad filled with scribbles. Adoption agencies, church homes, county birth ledgers. She traced each name with a fingertip, wondering which one might belong to the girl Irene had lost. A child born in the summer of 1964. Female. Biracial. Alabama. That narrowed things. But not nearly enough. Days passed. Between meals and helping Walter manage his medications, Lena chased paper trails. She made phone calls, begged access to old records, and leaned on every contact she'd built through Riverbend. And finally, a match. Margot Elaine Bennett. Born in Montgomery. Adopted by a white couple in Atlanta through a private Christian agency in 1965. No known siblings. No biological family listed. The photo on her law firm's website showed a poised, successful woman with sleek black hair, clear brown eyes, and a practiced smile. Partner at a civil rights nonprofit. Married. No children. Lena stared at the photo. There was something in Margot's eyes that felt familiar. She called twice and got voicemails. The third time, Margot picked up. "This is Margot Bennett." Lena froze, the words caught in her throat. "Hi, Ms. Bennett. My name is Lena Brooks. I work at Riverbend Care Home in Montgomery. I know this sounds strange, but I believe I've found something that may connect you to your biological family." Silence. Then, cautiously, "What kind of connection?" Lena explained, carefully, respectfully. She told Margot about Walter, about the letter hidden in the teddy bear, about Irene. She left out nothing, except her own trembling hope. On the other end, Margot said nothing for a long time. "I was told my parents died in a car crash," she said finally. "That no one wanted me. That's what the nuns said." Lena's heart broke. "I don't think that's true," she said softly. "They were young. They were in love. They were torn apart by hatred, not choice." "I don't know what you expect me to do with this," Margot said tightly. "I don't expect anything," Lena replied. "I just think you have a right to know." There was another pause. Then Margot said, "Email me the letter." Lena did. 3 days passed. No reply. Walter was quieter than usual. He spent more time looking out the window, holding the bear against his chest like it was the only thing anchoring him to the present. Irene, back in the care unit down the hall, had declined further. Her lucid moments were rare now. She didn't ask for Walter anymore. Lena began to worry the journey had led to a dead end. Then, one afternoon, a dark blue Lexus pulled into the parking lot. A woman stepped out in a tailored coat and heels, clutching a slim leather bag. "Margot." Lena met her at the front desk. "I didn't think you'd come," she said. "I didn't either," Margot replied. "But I read the letter. Twice. And I couldn't stop thinking about the handwriting. It felt like someone I missed, but didn't know I missed." They sat in the small visitor's room, away from the residence, where Lena handed her the original letter, the one Irene had written and sewn into the teddy bear. Margot held it delicately, like something sacred. Her eyes scanned the lines, lips trembling. "I memorized this," she whispered. "I hear her voice in every word. Would you like to meet him?" Lena asked gently. Margot hesitated. "He doesn't know me. He never stopped wanting to." Lena led her down the hall. Walter was seated by the window again, back to them. Lena approached first, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "Walter, someone's here to meet you." He turned slowly. Margot stepped forward. Her voice shook. "My name is Margot. I think I'm your daughter." Walter blinked. And then, his lips parted. "Irene's eyes," he whispered. Tears welled in Margot's eyes. "I didn't know," she said. "They never told me." Walter reached out, hand trembling. She took it without hesitation. "I didn't forget you," he whispered. Margot crumpled into his arms, sobbing like a child. In that moment, the years between them melted. All the loss, the silence, the questions, held together now by a trembling embrace and the quiet, astonishing truth. They had found each other. Lena sat outside Riverbend Care Home in her aging Corolla, forehead pressed to the steering wheel. The reunion between Walter and Margot had been beautiful, transformative, and exhausting. She hadn't realized how much of herself she'd poured into helping a man who, just weeks ago, hadn't spoken a word. Her phone buzzed. It was Nate again. Her boyfriend of nearly 2 years. "Nate, we need to talk." Tonight. She sighed. She already knew what was coming. Inside Riverbend, Walter's health had begun to decline. His moments of lucidity were slipping. His hands trembled more. He slept longer each day. The excitement of Margot's visit had briefly energized him, but now he seemed like someone winding down, gently, inevitably. And Irene. Irene was almost completely gone. She barely recognized anyone anymore. She spoke in fragmented memories and sometimes confused Lena for a nurse from decades ago. Clara said it was only a matter of time. Lena tried to shake off the heaviness as she walked back into the facility. Walter was asleep, the bear tucked into the crook of his arm, his breathing shallow but steady. Margot had gone back to Atlanta. They'd agreed to take things slow. She was still reeling, trying to integrate a new truth into a life built on half-history. She called Lena every other day, unsure whether she felt like a daughter, a stranger, or both. That night, Lena met Nate at their apartment. He was already packing. "I can't do this anymore, Lena," he said flatly. "You're not here. You're there. All the time. With them. They need me," she said, stunned. "Walter needs me. I needed you too. You just didn't notice." She watched him zip the suitcase shut. "This isn't just about them, is it?" she asked quietly. He paused. "No. But it was the last straw." He left that night without looking back. Lena didn't cry. She just sat on the couch in the silence that followed, feeling hollowed out and oddly relieved. Maybe she'd known all along that Nate loved the version of her who didn't get too involved, who didn't lose sleep over strangers and their old wounds. The next morning, she visited her mother. She hadn't been home in over a month. The moment she stepped through the door, the tension hit like a wall. "You look tired," her mother said, barely glancing up from her crossword. "I've been helping someone at the care home. An old man who found his daughter after 50 years. Her mother raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't sound like your job description." "It's not," Lena admitted. "But it's what needed to be done." Her mother sighed. "You've always had this habit, taking on the weight of the world. Don't you think it's time to focus on your own life?" Lena stared at her. "My life is full," she said finally. "Messy, yes. But full of things that matter." Her mother pursed her lips but said nothing. Lena didn't push. She'd learned long ago that her mother didn't know how to talk about emotions unless they were being locked away. Back at Riverbend, she found Irene humming softly in her room. For the first time in days, her eyes were clear. "I know you," Irene whispered as Lena approached. "You're the girl with the good heart." Lena smiled through tears. "That's me. I loved him," Irene said. "Walter. Even when they told me he was gone. Even when they took everything. I never stopped." "I know," Lena said gently. "He knows too." Irene smiled, but it was faint, distant. "Where is he?" "In his room. Resting. I'd like to see him. Tell him I remember the field with the sunflowers. Tell him I kept the picture." "I will," Lena promised. She sat with Irene for a long time, holding her hand as her eyes drifted shut again. Later, when Lena returned to Walter's room, he was awake, barely. "She remembers the sunflowers," Lena whispered. Walter's lips curved into the softest smile. "She always loved yellow." He coughed, weakly, and looked at her with something like pride. "You did all this," he said. "For me. For her." "You did it," Lena said. "I just listened." He looked at the bear in his lap, and then at her. "Don't give up, Lena. You still got a whole life ahead of you." She nodded, swallowing a sob. "I'm starting to believe that." For the first time in weeks, she felt grounded. Even in the ruins of her personal life, with Walter fading and Irene nearly gone, Lena understood something deeply true. Love, even late, even broken, still matters. The days passed like falling leaves, soft, slow, and full of quiet endings. Riverbend had grown hushed. Irene no longer spoke. Her lucid moments were gone entirely now, her eyes fixed on something far away, lost in a memory no one else could see. Walter slept more than he was awake. His breaths were shallow, his voice barely a whisper. Lena stayed close, a constant figure at his side, reading softly from the same books she'd started with. Poems, the Bible, even old love letters. One rainy morning, Clara stopped Lena in the hallway, holding a small floral box. "This was in Irene's things," she said. "We didn't find it until today. There's a letter inside." Lena opened it slowly. The paper was thin, aged with time, and trembled slightly in her hands. Irene's handwriting flowed across the page, slanted, full of emotion. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but Lena knew who it was meant for. "My dearest Walter, I don't know if you'll ever see this. I'm writing it in case you're still looking for me, in case the fire didn't take everything. They told me you were gone, that you'd left, that it was better this way. I believed them because I had nothing else. But I never stopped loving you. Not for a moment. I was pregnant when they took me away. I didn't even get to name her. A girl, they said. I hope she has your eyes. I tried to find you again. I tried to fight. But the world kept closing doors. If you ever find this, know that I never gave up on you. Not in my heart. You were my world. My freedom. My sunlight in a world that didn't want us to exist. Irene." Lena pressed the letter to her chest, breath stolen from her lungs. She drove to Atlanta that afternoon. Margot answered her door with tired eyes and a guarded expression. Lena handed her the letter without saying a word. Margot didn't speak as she read. Her eyes moved line by line, slowly at first, then faster, then trembling. By the final words, her hands were shaking. She sat down hard on the arm of her couch, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. "She wrote this," Margot whispered. "To him." "Yes," Lena said softly. "But she never sent it. Maybe she was afraid. Or maybe, no one gave her the chance." Margot clutched the letter like it was a lifeline. "I thought I didn't want to know," she said. "But now I feel like I've spent my whole life waiting for this." "She loved you," Lena said. "Even when they took you away. She never stopped loving either of you." Margot looked up, eyes shining. "Does he know?" "Not yet. He's fading," Lena said. "But he's still here. He's waiting." Margot nodded. "Then I'm coming with you." They returned together that evening. Lena led Margot into Walter's room. He was lying in bed, eyes half-lidded, the teddy bear nestled under his hand. He looked small, like time itself had worn him down. Margot knelt beside him. "Walter," she said gently. "It's me." "Margot." His eyes opened, slowly focusing on her. "I found something," she said, unfolding the letter. "From her." She read it aloud, each word breaking and healing at once. Walter didn't speak at first, but tears spilled down his cheeks. When she finished, he reached for her hand. "I knew," he rasped. "I knew she didn't stop." "She didn't," Margot whispered. "And I didn't either." Walter smiled faintly. "Thank you for coming." That night, Lena sat outside on the porch of Riverbend, the stars soft and dim above. For the first time in weeks, she felt like something had clicked into place. Not fixed, not perfect, but real. Inside, Irene lay peacefully, unaware. Walter slept deeply, the letter now tucked under his pillow. Margot stayed in a nearby guest room. For now, time had slowed. And in that stillness, Lena felt the weight of something sacred. A family, broken and scattered, was being stitched back together, letter by letter, hand by hand, heart by fragile heart. The morning Walter passed away, the sky over Montgomery was soft and gray, the kind of quiet sky that holds its breath. He went in his sleep, no pain, no fear, with the letter under his pillow and the bear in his arms. Lena was there when the nurse found him. She didn't cry at first. She just stood by his bed, hand resting gently on his. His face looked peaceful, almost relieved. As if some invisible burden had finally slipped off his shoulders in the night. Margot arrived not long after. She didn't speak when Lena told her, just sat beside her father and held his hand for the first and last time. Then she asked for a few minutes alone. Lena waited outside, sitting on the same bench where she'd once brought poetry and books, where Walter had first whispered, "Thank you." The old bear, threadbare, patched, and stitched with memory, sat on her lap. When Margot finally came out, her eyes were red, but she stood straighter. "He waited for me," she said softly. "He didn't leave until I knew." "He was proud of you," Lena replied. Margot gave a small, sad smile. "I think I was proud of him, too." They buried Walter 3 days later in a small, humble cemetery beneath a willow tree. Clara arranged everything. The staff came, and so did some of the residents, people Walter had lived near, but never spoken to. Yet they stood in respectful silence. Even those who never knew his story seemed to understand, something sacred had passed through their lives. Margot gave the eulogy. Her voice shook, but she spoke clearly, holding the letter Irene had written. "I never got to grow up with my father," she said. "But I got to find him. I got to see that love, even the kind buried for decades, doesn't disappear. It waits. It survives." She paused. "He didn't get to raise me, but in a way, he gave me something else. A second beginning. And I'm thankful for that." Afterward, Lena stayed behind. She placed the teddy bear on Walter's grave, just beside the stone. "He didn't forget you," she whispered, as if speaking to Irene. "And you never forgot him." Irene passed away quietly 3 days later. Margot was with her, holding her hand when the last breath left her chest. She didn't cry, not right away. Instead, she closed her mother's eyes and kissed her forehead. "She's with him now," she said, looking at Lena. Finally. The funeral was small, dignified, beautiful. The woman who had once been erased by time was now honored by the truth. Margot stood again, this time reading both of Irene's letters, the one that had been found in the bear, and the one that had never been sent. "She loved him," she said, her voice steady. "And she loved me. Even when the world tried to take all of that away." People wept openly. When it was over, Lena walked alone for a while, drifting through quiet streets, her heart full of grief and gratitude in equal measure. She didn't know what came next. But she knew she was no longer the same girl who had nervously stepped into Riverbend all those weeks ago. She was changed. By a silent man who had taught her the power of memory. By a woman who had waited a lifetime to be heard. By a daughter who had reclaimed her place in the world. On her last day at Riverbend, Lena packed up the small bookshelf in Walter's room, her books, a few photographs, a record of all the things they'd discovered together. She took the bear, too. Not to keep, but to carry forward. As she walked out, Clara caught her in the hallway. "You sure you're ready to go?" she asked. Lena nodded. "It's time. What will you do now?" Lena smiled faintly. "I don't know yet. But I think I'll find out." Outside, the sun was rising. The light was soft and golden, catching on the threads of the bear in her arms. A new day. A new beginning. She turned toward it, heart full. Sometimes, the smallest acts, reading a book, listening, refusing to give up, can uncover hidden truths, heal broken hearts, and bridge the space between what was lost and what can still be found. And sometimes, a girl with a kind heart and a bear in her hands walks away from sorrow not with pain, but with purpose.